Okay. So we have 2 Sundays that are actually Hanukkah.
Right.
This coming Sunday is HaRav Hanukkah, but it's a Lukas and Ner. So I will be in touch and I will let you know. We will be on board. I definitely will try to make it because it's a schus for me as well. So as Rabbi Gottesman mentioned, usually we deal with halachic sugyas, halachic discussions, which are most of the time nogea aloha lamaisa, but there is chibi yisera in the nature of a shir like the one we will have today. Especially my Rebbe, the Kloisenberger Rebbe, in his Pshetlach, this was a very common theme, and especially as HBrachos, to deal with Masa Avos, and actually tens or maybe hundreds of Svarim were written in the style analyzing what we learn in HBrachos between the Avos Hekdoshim and Yankov and with a halachic dikablik. So today's shir is not really typical, but anyway, Shivan Purim LaTorah and Yesh B'Zeh Chibu Yisera. So Rabbi Gottesman planned actually a combination of 2 different halachic issues, both associated with Parshas HaShavua. On one hand, the discussion between 2 of the Shevatim that wanted to save Yosef in a way. Lefi pshutoi shel mikra, and I stress and emphasize pshutoi shel mikra. We need to be very careful when we speak about Masa Avos, because, the maskilim, modern, circles, especially since the days of the Haskalah, they learned Pshutei Shel Mikra, analyzing the giants of yore with their own human perspectives, their shortcomings, their follies. That is not our Messiah. We're Messiaches to the giants of our history as Malachi Asholes, Malachi Elyon. We have no saga about the godless and the tzidkes of Rome, Yitzchak, Yankov, Moshe, Aaron, Yosef, David. These were tzaddikim, these were giants. We could not even appreciate or imagine their godless. And from the days of the Rishonim till our present generation, we interpret even their transgressions or sins al pi drash. So today we will be discussing 2 topics. The discussion between Reuven and Yehuda and their brothers, what to do with Yosef. Obviously, they were all angry at Yosef, and they envied the special relationship he had with Yankov, lefi pshutoi shel mikra. And then we will go on to the second sugya, which is Mechiras Yosef. And all this with a halachic dikablik. So the posuk in this week's parasha tells the story. V'yomer aleim Reuven, al tishpachu dam, hashlichu oisei al haporas asher b'midbar, v'yad al tishlechu bo. Don't shed blood. Don't kill him. Let's throw him into there was a pit there in the field. Let's throw him in there. And Yehuda has a different suggestion. V'yomer Yehuda el echad, ma beitza ki naro yesachinu v'chisinu osdamoi. Why should we kill our brother? So 2 brothers argued, plead with all the others. They wanted to kill him, just murder Yosef, and end the story of his crazy dreams. And once again, I say, lefi pshutoi shel mikra, Reuven said, no, let's throw him into the pit. V'yad al tishlechu bo. What Reuven had in mind, leman hitzalei seviyodem lashiva yarav. So the Rashbam says, "Hashlichu oisei al haporas asher b'midbar mokem she'en b'nei yodem etzion sham v'yom esmaelav." So what Reuben argued with his brothers, Reuben actually wanted to come back later and salvage and save Yosef. But his pitch to his brothers was, if you kill him, you're murderers, you're chayiv misa, that's the tzichem. Let's throw him into the pit. He'll die, but at least you won't be chayiv misa. You are not roitzah. So Chazal teach us, aborek ein boy mayim ein boy nechoshim va'akabim yesh bo. So when the Rashbam explains, let's throw him into the pit and he'll die on his own, that could happen in two different ways. Either he'll be killed by the serpents, by the scorpions and the snakes, because that pit was full of snakes and scorpions, or he might just die from hunger or thirst. Can't climb out of the pit. Ben kach u ben kach yesh la'ayin, would he be chayav misa or not? So on one hand, Shulchan Aruch Chaim Semaku B'Dalad Afil Anochash Korach HaVakever Lo Yafsik B'Tfila Yochal Elach Mukomacha Gedei Shipar Anochash Akav Poisech L'Vishamud Yosef Lahazik B'Anochash Nama Emru Shikoyis or Mizek Lahazik Poisek. And the Gemara Yevamah says, if you step on a snake or you're in very close proximity, it is very likely he will bite you, even if you don't start up with him. Actually, snakes don't eat human beings. We're not part of their menu. They will bite when they'll feel threatened. And therefore, if you're far away, the snake will never chase after you to bite you. But if he feels threatened, if he feels in danger, he will bite. So if you throw a person into a pit, and then the snakes will bite, or a scorpion will sting you, is that Ritzicha, or is it only a grama? It is quite clear that it's only a grama. So according to the Rashbam, our interpretation would be, are we connected? Because my screen went blank.
We see the Rav, we see and hear the Rav perfectly.
But I don't have any Manamakoimis on my screen. Could you put the Manamakoimis on my screen? We should be.
Yeah, they disappeared for a moment. Though we're going to try to put them back. Here we go.
Okay. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin, actually it's a Mishnah. Shisa boyas akelev, shisa boyas anochish potur. Heshech boyas anochish, Rabbi Yehuda Machayev achachum poitrem. So the Gemara differentiates. If you tease a dog or tease a snake till the snake will bite, potur, it's only a grama. Heshech boyas anochish means you actually grab the snake by its head or by its neck, and you push the snake onto a person's body. Even then, Machlokes Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda Machayev, Chachamim Poitrim, and the Rambam paskins in according to the Chachamim. Yochid v'Rabim halochi kerabim. Even hishech boy is anochish potur. Kal v'chomer, if you throw a person into a pit, there are snakes. Snakes might bite him, but that is only a grama, and it's not considered a rotzeach biyodayim. And what will happen if Yosef will die from hunger or thirst? Once again, that would not be considered a rotzeach. And this brings us to a sugya Masechet Sanhedrin of Ayin Zayin Amud Beis. So we go over from the sugya presently on our screen to the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Ayin Zayin Amud Beis, Kavsai V'Meis Berav Patur. If you tie the person down, he can't move, and he's just laying there helplessly until he dies from hunger. Kavse b'chama, v'meis, v'tzina v'meis chai, sav chama l'v'sav, tzina l'v'y, potu. So, if you tie a person down and you cause them ultimately to die from hunger or thirst, it is a grama, and you would not be defined as HaRav. Could we move forward in the Mara Mekaimis? I think we have a Rambam, or we should have one.
It goes back to the first page. There's two Rambams. We have only one. We can get the second one also. We have Gimel Yud.
Okay.
The Rav wants Beis.
Yeah.
We can put up Beis also.
No, this one is fine. Akovis is fair, Benia Barov at Shemeis. Or Shekovse Venicha Bomokam Jesoy Tzina V'chama Potu. HaRav Dorish Domim, Dorish Damoy. Bekol Elo Ein based in Mamis and Oisel. So what I want to make clear, Reuben's argument with his brothers is, if you kill him, you're at Tzeach, and at Tzeach Chayev Misa. Let's throw him into the pit, and he will perish. But at least we wouldn't be Chayev Misa as with Tzeach. So as I made clear, and that is why we brought the various different Gemaras and Rambams, whether he will be killed by those animals, snakes or scorpions, or he will just die from hunger or thirst. Benkach u benkach, he doesn't have a din of a Ritzach al pi based. So Reuben actually wanted to save him, but his pitch to his brothers was, okay, you want to do away with Yosef, but at least don't be Chayev Misa. Yehuda says, no. So Tzorach Iyun, when the Rambam says, Hareyu roitzeach bedoirish domem doirish mimeno dam, is that kal tfei meroitzeach? Or mitzad chumras aver is just the same. It's just a technicality that Beis Din cannot judge him. How do we define what the Rambam says? Hareyu roitzeach bedoirish domem yidrosh damav. Does he have all the chumra of a ritzeach? Just a technicality. Beis Din won't be that, but a Kodesh Baruch Hu will. Or maybe no, it is a lesser aveda. Ein ze chumra kol kach. So maybe that was the argumentation, different approaches of Reuben and Yehuda. Yehuda says, I don't think Reuben's eitzah is a good one. You're still going to be a ritzeach. Whether he dies from hunger or thirst, or the snakes will bite him and he will perish, still a ritzeach. Yes, Reuben has a point. You're not Chayav Misa's Beis Din, but there's no Beis Din anywhere around, and we're not going to testify in a Beis Din against one another. So Yehuda's argument is, you're still a ritzeach. Really makes no difference whether you kill them directly or indirectly. The Rambam says, Hareyu ritzeach bedoirish domem yidrosh damav. Now the Rambam also says a chiddush in Perek Beis Mehelches Ritzeach that a ben noyach is chayiv even on a groma. So another way to interpret, that's in Perek Tes Mehelches Malachim, not in Hilches Ritzeach. So I don't know whether we have it on our screen.
We do, but before the Rav goes to, could we ask? Because I only was medayik. The Ram uses slightly different lashon than Perek Beis, where he says avoin hariga b'yadai. Is there a difference here? What was the Rambam trying to be madgish in Beis? There he says ritzeach, and here he says avoin.
Right. We have it on our screen. Ben noach shoring nefesh. After ube b'ayim ay nereg olav. B'chenem horei treifa shekavse v'nosma al-riyot shanicha b'rovat shemeis. Hoel v'hemes makol mokum nereg. B'chenem horei groidef. Yeah, so the Rambam here says that a ben noach is chayiv. Which Rambam did you quote with?
Entschuldig, before the Rav goes to Ben Noach, Beis or Pesach, not this one. This is Hilchos Malachim. Go back, not this one. You got to go
Beis,
back to search it. Ritzicha Bays. Go back to the Barilan or whatever it is. Bays. Yeah, we had it earlier. You have to
So
take the
the Rambam uses a slightly different language in Pering Beis. Hasoicher hoireg להרוג את חברו, או ששולח עבודה והרגו, או שכובסה והניחו לפני הריב וכיוצא בוי, כל אחד מאלה שופך דום ההוא, ועוון הריגה ביודוי, וחי מיסר שמיים, והם במיסר בייס. I think it is the same as we just had a few moments ago in Gimel Yud. It's a different language, So in Israeli law, there is one crime is murder, retzicha, and the other is hariga. I think in the English language, it's murder and homicide. Homicide is not always murder, and homicide is when there was no intention to kill, but there definitely was negligence, and there was intention to harm. But in the Rambam, there is no difference. Avoin hariga biyodoi is the same as harezet retzeach, and in both sources, the Rambam says, chayev misa biyadei shumayim. So maybe the question and the different approaches of Yehuda and Reuven says, a goyim is not the same level of chumrah as a retzeach. It is an aveda, but he's not a retzeach. And Yehuda's argument is, after all, avoin hariga biyodoi, hareza retzeach, chayev misa b'dei shemayim. So either Yehuda's argument is, okay, so you're not the retzeach, but it still is a terrible aveda, or maybe Yehuda argues, klape shemayim, it is the same aveda, or, as I mentioned a moment ago, the Rambam, we had it on the screen just a few moments ago, the Rambam in Periktes Milchas Malachim says that a Ben Noach is nerag even on a Geram. So these are three different approaches to just try to understand from a halachic perspective, what was the discussion? So the brothers decided to do away with Yosef. He's causing too much envy, too much strife, too much division in the family. We need to get rid of it. They plan to kill him. Reuben says, let's throw him into a pit and he will perish on his own. And Yehuda says, no, chas v'sholem. We could sell him. We could just take him into custody and sell him to a distant land. And let's just hope and pray he's going to be happy wherever he's going to be. So we offer three different interpretations. What was the question? What did Reuben argue? And what did Yehuda argue?
Can I ask a Shaila? What did the Bnei Chabur add the following question? We know that the bar was more than 20 amos deep from the Goyen's famous Vartan, Bayrek and B'mayim. Why, if you throw somebody into a bar that's more than 20 amos deep, why isn't that a riga? Why is that grama? Why isn't that Ritzicha b'yadayim?
Well, that would be a good question.
It's 60 feet deep.
Well, the fact was that Yosef didn't die.
Right.
And, I don't have a chumash before me. I'm just standing up a moment. I want to check the lesson in the chumash. I'll be back in 5 seconds.
Lemaisa, he survived. That's Lemaisa. But midim havlo, midim chavata. I'm asking you, throw a guy down 6 stories is not. Lemaisa, he survived.
Yes. So what I wanted to check in the pasuk, so the pasuk actually says, V'hishlichu oisoi el habor. I do not know what that means, that they threw him into the pit, or they
Lowered
just
him in?
threw him into the pit. So,
Maybe they lowered him down. Is that possible?
yes, that is what I was suggesting. The lashon of the pasuk is v'yashlichu oisoi, but I do not know whether in Lashon Kodesh that actually means that they threw him into a pit. Maybe they just lowered him down, and that's why he wasn't hurt. Because, the Gemara says, Asora Tvochim is a bola misa, Tisha Tvochim is a bola nezikin, but we do not find the Yosef was hurt at all. So maybe they just lowered him into the pit, and they didn't throw him into the pit. So, in my sefer, and I don't know whether we have all these sources on a sheet, but let's move forward and check. I also brought Toises in heaven is Mesupak. Kavsoi Bechamo. Is that only if we tied him down, Bechamo, or also if we tied him down and we brought him? We put him out in the desert, and we actually brought him to Mokar Machamo, and Toises has two drachim. So let's have a look at the beginning of the Toises on our screen. Mokem shesaf chama lavoi chayiv loyra barachmona mitzamtzena b'mokem shehitchel boya nezek kvar mil im kavsoi b'fnim vehevioi b'mokem shesoif chama lavoi v'soif tzina lavoi nera dechayiv למאן אשוי משם חיצוב, דלעניין מיסה נמה מקייben באשוי משם חיצוב. So, major discussion in Bava Kama Chav Beis. When you put on a fire and the fire spreads and it burns down a field, is it niskei momen or is it like zoyrek chetz? We paskin Eisha Mishum Chitzov. And Tosfos argues that there is no difference whether you bring the fire to the house or you bring any chayfetz or a person to the fire. And therefore, if I tied a person in the house and I took him out of the house and I put him in an open field and he dies from dehydration, from heat or cold, or thermo, I don't remember the word when a person dies from intense cold, whatever it is. If I brought the person to the place, according to one Mahalach and Tosfos Chayev, and then Tosfos is Mesupik. Tosfos says maybe not. Maybe Eisha Mishum Chitzov is just, when I put on the fire, then the fire is like an arrow or a spear. It's like throwing a spear. But if it brought the person to a place where Sav Chami Lavai, Potu. So maybe that would be the question, throwing Yosef into a pit. And ultimately he will perish in that pit. So according to the first Malach and Tosfos, that would be Ritzeach Mamish. According to the second, goes back only a grama and not Ritzeach. There's another Machlokes Rishonim, whether Eisha Mishum Chitzov is only relevant to monetary claims and damages, or also to the din of Ritzeach. Yeah, I just saw the right definition is hypothermia. Hypothermia is dying from cold. So you could either die from dehydration, being out in the sun too long, and that happens all the time with Sarenu, or hypothermia is dying from cold, which happens many times with these homeless people in a tough winter night. So Tosfos is Mesupik. If you bring a person to a place and you cause him to die either from hypothermia or from dehydration, whether you would be chayav. So once again, that might be a question regarding throwing Yosef into the pit, or to the contrary, the opinion of the Rambam is that Eisha Mishum Chitzov has nothing to do with Dinei Ritzeach. And in Hilchos Ritzeach, a person is not chayev an eish. Chayev eisha mishum chitzav is only relevant to monetary claims, but not to dinei roitzeach. So the Rambam is in Perek Gimel Melchus L'Tzeach Halucha Yud. I don't know whether we have it on the screen. It should be coming after Tosfos in Sanhedrin. So the Tosfos we saw a moment ago, let's skip this. Let's skip.
It's there. It's on the first Maramakim page, Pesach, on the first Maramakim page. You don't have to search for it. It's on the first Maramakim page. Gimel Yud.
So the Tosfos we just saw, Tosfos clearly says, Hoilig es a nefesh is chayiv b'chetz, b'eishoy, just like zoylik chetz. If you shoot an arrow or throw a spear and you kill the person, definitely is a ritzeach. Tosfos says the same as eisha mishum chitzot, but the Rambam has a different opinion. And the Rambam, it is clear, einoy chayiv misa mishum eish. So, yeah, I think it's more mefurish than this, and it is also. Let me get up a moment and take off my Rambam. Yeah, I apologize. Sometimes I need to get up and check my sources. So the Rambam clearly says, even though he tied him down and he brought him physically, Lo kedivrei Tosfos. Just one moment. So we offered 5 different interpretations. What might have been the discussion between Yehuda and Yosef and Reuven. Reuven suggested, let's throw him into the pit, and Yehuda says, no, that is not a good option. If we want to get Yosef out of the way, we should sell him to the Yishmaelim, which brings us to source number 2. The question of Goinev, Nefesh, Umachoroi. Because the Pasuk says, Goinev, Nefesh, Umachoroi, Mois, you must. So what was the genius in the Eitzah of Yehuda? Yehuda says, let's not throw him into the pit, but rather sell him. So there's a very, very famous Medrash. And the Medrash is also quoted in the Kinnis, in Musaf of Yom Kippur. It's not really Kinnis. It's interesting. But there is one tefillah that actually is similar to Kinnis, and we say it in Musaf Yom Kippur. It's about Asor Haruga Malchus, and we do mention that Asor Haruga Malchus was a kapora and the chet of Mechiras Yosef. 10 Shevatim were part of the conspiracy. Benjamin wasn't there, and Yosef was the victim. So there were 10 of them that were part of this conspiracy. And the Medrash that we have on our screen tells the story of Rabbi Shmuel. Hizkir es Hashem ba'oro lamala. And that's a very famous kino that we say in Tfilas Musaf in Yom Kippur. So this Medrash is at greater length. And Rabbi Shmuel learns in the heavens that this is a Gzeira for Mechiras Yosef. So were they Chayav Misa within Goynev Nefesh Machoroi or not? So the Rashbam, let's move forward or backward. I don't know, but I think we should have the Rashbam. V'yabru anoshem edyonim soichim. So the Rashbam says, "B'toich shoy yoshvim lecho lechem, v'rachoy kemo yektzas menabor, lebilti achoy l'adam, umamtinim hoy liyishmaelim sharo." From far away, they saw a caravan of Yishmaelim. Koydem shabo Yishmaelim, avru anoshem edyonim acherim, v'ra'u b'boil v'moshchu b'machru medyonim liyishmaelim. So according to the Rashbam, that's the way he's mafarish the posuk. It wasn't the Shevatim that sold them. Yesh loimer shehagromes ma'aseyim sio b'mchirosoi. Zen nerali lifi oimek derech pshutoi shel mikra. Ki v'yavru anoshe medyonim ashma al yidei mikra v'hem achru li Yishmaelim. V'af b'os loimer v'yimkeru es Yosef li Yishmaelim ki achav machru. Af kein tzorach loimer shem tzivu lemedyonim. So according to the Rashbam, the brothers didn't actually sell Yosef. They planned to sell him. They were waiting for the Yishmaelim to come closer. But it was the Medyonim that arrived and they sold them to the Yishmaelim. So according to this interpretation, the Shevatim weren't Chayav Misa at all. Interpretation number 2. Let's have a look at the Rambam. Geneva peritesa lochabeis. Eina ganav chayev misas chenek ad sheyigne v'seyesor v'yachnisenu l'rshusoi v'yishtamesh boi v'yimkerenu la'acherem shenemar v'hisamer boi u'machoroi. And that is actually a machlokes in the Gemara. But the Rambam paskins, Goynev nefesh machoroi is only chayev if you worked him. So I suggested maybe that is the Lashon of Yehuda. Then he says, "Havon imkarenu lishmelim v'yodeinu al tehibo." So these words "yodeinu al tehibo," lefi pshuto shel mikra is, we won't kill him, we won't hurt him physically, we'll just sell him. But according to this Rambam, I would suggest maybe Yadenu al Tehibo, we're not even going to punish him, we're not going to torture him, we're not going to have him work for us. So according to the Rambam, as long Shelohit Amrubo, Yachniseno L'Rshusoi V'yishtamesh Boi, there is no Issa of Goynev Nefesh U'Machoroi. Interpretation number 3. One of the Gedolim in Hungary was the HaRav. Kleisenberg Rav visited him as a bocher. So the HaRav, I don't know whether any of you know the Weiss in HaRav. In America, there was a very choshev Talmud Chochem. He was in Chicago, was Satmar Chosed. And I happened to know him very well. He visited our home once when I was still a bocher in Kiryat Tzanz, Netanya. He was a great Talmud Chacham. I most admire him for a sefer he published named Mekadshe Hashem, because I always had a very keen interest in everything associated with the Holocaust. Since I was very young, my parents were both survivors. My great Rebbe was a survivor. So the Weiss in HaRav, his name was the Tzvi Hersh Meislish, published a sefer called Mekadshe Hashem. And there's a compilation of Tuvas La'alocha that Rabbonim who perished in the Holocaust, and they didn't have the opportunity to print their own Sforim. And he compiled a lot of their Divrei Torah and produced a sefer, I think it's 2 or 3 volumes, called Mekadshe Hashem, Shalas Tshuvas Mekadshe Hashem. He also describes his own story of heroics and Mesiras Nefesh and suffering in the Holocaust. His father was Reb David Meislish. He was the Rav of Uhel, and he has Shalas Tshuvas Binyan David and Binyan David HaTorah, which is B'derech Pilpul. So on Binyan David HaTorah, I think we should have it on our screen if we move down. He offers various different interpretations.
I'm sorry, we do not have it, Rebbe.
We do have it, Pesach. We do have it.
Yeah, I think I saw it. Need to scroll
We do
down.
have it. You showed it to us before.
So in Sefer Binyan David, the HaRav, and Bikesh Yankov Leishav Bishalva, Kofetz Olav Rugzai Shel Yosef.
Pesach, you don't have to search for it. It was on the Marmakoimis. It was in the printed Marmakoimis. So just scroll down.
You know, before you scroll down, okay, we already scrolled down, okay. So if we could go down, 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 we have one entire page, which is from the Binyan David. Okay, first paragraph, very brief. I think it's the second paragraph, Ot Tet Zayin, left column, second paragraph. Oid yesh lefarish, bikeshan kavleisha bishalva. Delachen bikeshalva, the sova dagola seina matchel mishanoy Yitzchak. Ba'oretz lo lehem, Eretz Yisrael mechzekes ma'Avraham Avinu, v'mikra lo hem, v'hinei. Hakadmonim hikshu, eich mochru hashvotem es Yosef. Uksiv goyne b'nefesh ha'machorei mois yomos. V'kosev biyad avi sholem. I have no idea who this sefer is. I never saw such a sefer. But today with Oitzer HaChochma, Hebrew books, it's so easy, you know, all the information. I would be very curious to know who wrote this sefer. But the Binyan David quotes, Yad avi sholem, kosev letaretz. Amru chazal goyne b'nefesh ha'machorei. You need to take him out of his domain, and only then are you chayav and going to Shemachorei. By Mochias Yosef v'Shchem, the Sovro the Eretz Yisrael mechzekes v'Avraham Avinu, v'Shechem mechzekes ma'Viseinu liYosef. So they didn't take him out of his domain, and therefore there would be no avera of going to Nefesh Shemachorei. The Sover Eretz Yisrael Murzekes, V'alkein Moicha Shvotem Es Yosef, Kofetz Olav Rugzai Shel Yosef. So this is very typical to the Mefalpalim in the Hungarian style. So the Binyan David says, Bikesh Yankov Leisha V'Shelva. Yankov felt, I'm in my own land. I'm in my home. This is my land. But that caused the Shevatim to sell Yosef, and their argument was, we're not taking him out of his land. Could you make this a bit bigger? I should be able to read it. It's just so tiny. So who is this Yad Avi Sholem? Yad Avi Sholem Offenbach, 1720, so that goes back 300 years. Wow, yeah, more than 300 years. So obviously it's one of those forms that are b'derech pilpul. Sefer was printed more than 300 years ago, amazing. I never heard of this sefer, but there's so many forms that we're not really familiar with. So let's go back to our fundamental sheet. So we suggested a few different terutzim. Number one, according to the Rashbam, the Shevatim didn't even sell them. The Medyonim did. Number two, lo hishtamshu boy. And the Yisrael of going to Nefesh is only im hishtamish boy. Number three, they didn't take him out of his own domain because that is the Son of Zekas. Number 4 brings us to the Rambam Perik Tes Halacha Hey of Hilchas Geneva. Perik Tes Halacha Hey Hilchas Geneva. The Rambam writes that a goynev is a cotton machoroi is not chayiv. A goynev is b'noya yisocha v'koton v'chein ha'petropsin shekam v'yisei yisoyim shem smuchem etzlom v'bal habayis shegona v'echod mebnei beisi esmuchem al shulchonoi u'melam etonoi kishegona v'echod menatalam alomdim etzloi אף על פי שנשתמש בהם אחורי פוטו, שנאמר ונמצא ביודי פרט האלה, שהם מצויים ביודי. So this is also a big chiddush of the Rambam. Goynev is the cotton, Einer Chayiv. Tshuvas Maharitatz. Maharitatz was Marit Tzahalon. One of the Kadmonim 500 years ago. Quite surprising. In his lengthy discussion about Goynev Nefesh Machoroi, he actually deals with our parsha, with the Shevatim. And sometimes even the greatest poskim deal with some divrei drush. So he starts off with the Rambam, a Goynev Esakoton is not Chayim Mishum Goynev Nefesh Machoroi. The question is, does a cotton mean necessarily a minor? Cotton should Lohevi Simone Gadless, or it means selling your younger brother, or a father selling his son. Or does cotton mean he's smaller than the seller? He is under his responsibility, jurisdiction. So logically, we would say it's even a bigger crime. I don't know the legal definitions in American and English, but in Eretz Yisrael, if you hurt a person that is a chasar yesha, a dependent, person that's dependent on you, it's a far greater crime. But we're dealing with Gzeres HaKosuf. So the Marit Salam deals with the question, what does Goynev Esakot mean when the Rambam says he's potor? Does it necessarily mean a minor? And if we scroll down, I think we'll see that the Marit Salam actually deals with our parasha, with Mechiras Yosef. If we just, it's quite a lengthy discussion. Okay, let us see where he comes to Yosef and his brothers.
You know what it is?
Here it is on the bottom of our page. ומיד מה ששמעתי שהיקשה, החוכם השורם הרב רבי שמואל עטיה, על אחי יוסף, כיצד אומרים מה ביצה כנער יסכינו לחו ונמכרנו, הרי אויברם על גוינה ושם אחורוי. בתרץ, לא יהיה חייבה משום גוינה ושם אחורוי, משום דו אמרינה ונמציאו לפרט למוצי. So he said Yosef was in their responsibility. רויסי משייק של דבורוב. הרמב"ם לא כתוב הקוטן, יוסף כבר היה גדול, בן 17 שנה. So there were over. So he deals with the question, does Achav HaKotten necessarily mean Dafka a cotton or smaller than they are? And he also goes into various different discussions about Goynev, Ish, Umechari. So let's just scroll down and see the bottom of the page, the Medrash Rabbah. So the Yerushalmi, Achiv and Emken, Shemelim Amru, Nelech v'nitvas daka shaloilom, Kenan shechoto, lo lehevin niskanel, Avzel, Achiv and Emken, Rishmelim, v'yishmu echad. So the Rambam also writes, Goynev Eved Umacharoi is not Chayiv. So according to this Medrash, they argued he has the din of an Eved, or he should have a din of an Eved. And that is why they wanted to sell him La'avdus, and Goynev Eved Umacharoi once again is not Chayiv. So these are 5 different interpretations regarding the halachic discussion of Goynev Shemachoroi and 5 different drachim regarding the Isser of Goyrem Mavas L'Chaveiro. So actually, in today's Shiva Derech Darash, we touched upon 10 different svaros. 5 dealing with the question of Reuven's argument, 5 dealing with Yehuda's Chiddush. So Reuven suggested to the brothers, instead of killing Yosef, let's just indirectly bring about his demise. And we discussed 5 different svaros regarding Gram Misa L'Chaveiroi. Yehuda had a different suggestion. No, we won't bring about his death at all. Rather, we'll sell him. And then Gedolei Adoros asked, but Goynev Isha Machorei Mois Yomas, there is also a Chiyuv Misa. And we discussed 5 different possible terutzim, all based on Yesodus HaHalacha, Gemoras and Rambams. So,
would the Rav like to enlighten us a little bit on the basic psak din and your mahalach and on what basis they were danim at all?
So that is a separate discussion. And, you know, I make this comment many times. Whenever we deal with Masa Avos, so hundreds of Svarim throughout the ages dealt with Masa Avos, and I think we touched upon this just in our last session. Does that mean they actually were Makayim all the details? And a similar question would be in a totally different realm. So the story of Mechiras HaBchoira, when Yaakov buys the Bchoira from Esav, hundreds of Svarim dealt with the questions, and not only Sifrei Drash, Chubas Arivash, Perush Atosh Alatok, Tzais HaChoishan, and Esha and Ches. The Tzais was the founder of Lambdas, and he deals with the Mechiras HaBchoira. Rashi, to the contrary, writes, Mechiras HaBchoira has nothing to do with transactions, nothing to do with kinyonim. It all has to do with Akrovas Karbonos, nothing to do with money. So this just shows the different approaches. How do we interpret Maseh Avos? Was it all based on halacha? It was before Matan Torah. So I think the discussion we had last week, is it actually all the specific halachas, or in a way, tiknu tikunim, yichdu yichudim? Similar question would be not kiyum mitzvahs al yedei avos, but other parshiyos in Masa Avos, Kinyan HaBchoira, Mechiras Yosef, was that necessarily based on halachic criteria, or it has all to do with Pnimius, with Kabbalah, and has no kesher with halacha? So Reb Shlomo asked, what was the judgment that the brothers passed, and why did they think that Yosef is Chayav Misa? Assuming that they decided Yosef is Chayav Misa. So one approach is Eiva Menachai. The Shlomo Kodesh says they weren't aware that Yosef is a Tzadik, and he's making these animals with Seifi Yetzirah, and therefore there would be no Yisra of Eiva Menachai. But the brothers saw him eating Eiva Menachai. Eiva Menachai is Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Noach, Azaros and Zur Misosa. But then the question would be, if it was Chayav Misa, so why did Reuven and Yehuda come along and argue with the brothers? No, we can't kill him. Let's sell him. So maybe selling him would be the equivalent of Golus. But Golus is only hoiding nefesh b'shigava, has nothing to do with Eiva Menachai. So once again, bearing in mind that it was before Matan Torah. So maybe before Matan Torah, in a way, Golus would be a kapora for other Avedas as well, and lav dafka hoiding nefesh b'shigava. So the classical approach is that Yosef ate Eiva Menachai, And that is why the brothers thought, Chayev Misa, Sheva Mitzvahs Menech, Azaroson, Zuli Misoson, and therefore they judged that he's Chayev Misa. But once again, so who judged him? Edechod, Dayan Echod, that is the din of Ben Noach. So why did Yehuda say no, Chas v'Shalom? And why did Reuben say, let's not kill him, let's throw him into the pit? So I once again say, many Gedolim were very fond of these pilpulim, depicting and defining Masa Abbas based on Yesodas HaHalacha. And I did the same in various different simonim in Minchas Osha HaRav, even though in recent years, my tendency is more to be Yosef in fundamental halacha in my shiurim, even on the parsha, and less drash. But in Minchas Osha and Chumash Bereshis, there are quite a few simonim that, similar to the one we discussed today, which are based on derech drash. So I hope you enjoyed the shiur today, and we will be in touch with Reb Shleimer regarding. I'll try to make an effort, and we should be able to learn next week. But if we do learn next week, it definitely will be on some sugyas of Chanukah. Have a great day.
Okay, yes, quite around.